Bird-watching grandma notices something strange about parked vehicle. Heart drops when she takes a closer look. Barbara Goosey had lived in her Minnesota neighborhood for years. On this particular morning, it started like any other. It was cold outside, and she was moving between the house and the yard, filling the bird feeders near her window. She kept her binoculars close and watched the birds carefully, noticing patterns most people would miss. Bird watching was something she genuinely enjoyed. It gave her a reason to slow down and pay attention to small details most people passed by without noticing. She liked recognizing patterns, knowing which birds arrived at certain times, and spotting anything that didn't quite fit. But little did she know, that habit of observing would matter more than she realized. That morning started like many others. It was cold, the kind of Minnesota cold that hits you right in the bones. After feeding the birds, as Barbara passed the front window, she glanced across the street at the church parking lot. Over the years, she developed a knack for noticing things that didn't quite fit. It was something small, almost subconscious, but it made her more aware than most. And in that moment, her eyes landed on a white SUV parked there with its engine running. At first, she didn't think much of it. Cars stopped in that lot all the time. People ran inside to grab something, waited for someone, or turned around. It wasn't unusual, but as she continued her morning, she kept noticing it. The SUV was still there. No one had stepped out. No one had returned. The engine kept running, exhaust curling into the cold air. She found herself looking back again, not because she was worried, but because it didn't make sense. She tried to continue her routine. She straightened the living room, put on a fresh pot of coffee, but every few minutes, her eyes drifted back to the window. The SUV was still there, alone in the empty lot. Something told her she should keep watching. Barbara suddenly had the gut feeling to pick up her binoculars and take a closer look. The situation was unusual enough to make her curious, but she didn't panic. She just kept watching. Then, only moments later, her phone suddenly buzzed. She picked it up casually, expecting a text or a notification. Instead, it was an alert from Minnesota authorities. Barbara stopped and read it carefully. The alert described a missing vehicle and one-year-old child. It included the color, the type, and said the situation was urgent. Barbara's stomach dropped instantly. She looked back at the SUV, then back at her phone, rereading the details to make sure she wasn't jumping to conclusions. The description sounded familiar, but Barbara stayed focused and didn't panic. She read the alert again and compared it to the vehicle parked outside. The details matched. The more she compared them, the more certain she became that this was not a coincidence. She grabbed her binoculars and focused on the license plate. She checked it twice, just to be sure, and it was a match. Her hands shook before her mind fully caught up, and then seconds later, she picked up the phone and called the police. She calmly explained what she was seeing, where the SUV was, and that it appeared to match the alert. After the call, Barbara stayed by the window, her mind raced. She thought about the child mentioned in the alert and the parents, imagining how scared they must be. She thought about her own grandchildren and how unbearable it would feel not knowing where they were. Police arrived quickly, and when Barbara saw them pull into the parking lot, she bundled herself up and went outside. Officers approached the vehicle carefully. When they opened the door, a baby began to cry from inside. The child was alive. The one-year-old boy, Demarion White, was removed from the vehicle and checked over immediately. Officers wrapped him up and made sure he was breathing normally. Despite everything that had happened, the little boy was thankfully alert and responsive. He was later taken to the hospital as a precaution, where doctors confirmed he was unharmed. Police later explained that the outcome could have been very different with the cold temperatures. The situation could have turned dangerous if the vehicle had run out of gas or stopped running. Time had been critical, and time was exactly what Barbara had given them. Only afterward did the full story come out. Earlier that day, the boy's mother had strapped him into his car seat and stepped back inside briefly to grab something she'd forgotten. When she returned, her Jeep was gone, with her son still inside. The family panicked and contacted the police immediately, and an Amber Alert was issued across the state. The SUV had been abandoned in the church parking lot, still running, with the child left alone inside during freezing temperatures. But thanks to Barbara noticing something that didn't feel right and choosing to trust her instincts, the child was found in time. When the news of the rescue got out, people started calling Barbara a hero. The story spread fast. Local media picked it up, and police publicly thanked her for paying attention and acting quickly. Barbara never saw it that way. To her, it wasn't some big moment. She noticed something that didn't sit right and did what made sense. She made a call and moved on. In her mind, anyone else would have done the same thing if they'd noticed it. Police didn't agree with that at all. They pointed out that this kind of thing happens every day. People see kids alone. They notice odd behavior, doors left open, cars parked where they shouldn't be. Most people shrug it off and keep going. They don't want to get involved. Barbara did get involved. She paid attention, trusted her gut, and acted. That's what changed the outcome. At first, that was the end of it. Then the city stepped in. On February 9th, 2021, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey officially declared it Barbara Gust Day. It wasn't about making her famous. It was just the city acknowledging that one simple decision made at the right time had a real impact. In the days after the rescue, Barbara quietly returned to her usual routine. Her mornings were spent watching the birds that visited her feeder, noticing their movements and colors. Afternoons were reserved for her garden, trimming, planting, and caring for the plants she had tended for years. To her, nothing had changed. Life went on, even though one small decision had already made a big difference. For a 1-year-old boy, however, everything had changed. For Demarion's family, the hours before he was found were some of the most frightening they had ever experienced. Each passing minute felt heavy with worry. Not knowing where he was or if he was safe made every second tense and uncertain. There was fear, helplessness, and the constant question of whether someone would find him in time. Relief only came when he was finally located and returned home. Authorities later highlighted the case to show why public awareness matters and how critical systems like Amber Alerts can be. Amber Alerts are designed to get the public involved immediately when a child goes missing. They aren't just notifications on a phone. They rely on people noticing when something doesn't feel right and taking action. In this case, the alert was active, but it still needed someone to pay attention. Barbara noticed something unusual and acted. Her call gave authorities the information they needed to respond quickly. Without that action, the alert alone might not have been enough. It shows how a single decision, combined with the system, can change the outcome entirely. What makes this story stand out isn't a dramatic rescue or a cinematic moment. It's about someone noticing something unusual and choosing to do something about it. Barbara didn't seek recognition. She didn't expect it. She was a grandmother looking out her window, observing something that didn't feel right and deciding to act. That choice made all the difference.